Well, we're recording this for YouTube, and there's guys out there streaming this to a few thousand people. So they've probably been watching us getting set up and having a laugh. Let's welcome everybody from the audience tonight, and welcome to our special guests, and thank you for attending tonight, or this afternoon in your case. I think it'd be good in a moment if we just all introduce ourselves. I'll just remind everyone the purpose of tonight's meeting and what we're doing. We're basically raising funds at the moment to take Dick Thompson's Arsenal stress resilience system and to make it available to about 500 certified veterans who would then get some support with stress resilience, and we're raising funds for that tonight. We've set a target of $10,000, and so far we've achieved 3,600, and we're only 3 or 4 hours into the session, and it's running for the next 24 hours in total. And most of the team are doing the full 24 hours, so it's going to be one hell of a marathon for us. And we're playing in the SOG video game, running through the whole campaign, through the missions for the next 12 hours. And after that, we're playing as Mike Force for 12 hours, fighting off waves of NBA. So we're doing, in a fun way, what you guys did all those years ago in Vietnam and in Laos and Cambodia. So anyway, welcome, gentlemen. And if we could introduce ourselves, we've got Nick on the screen. So I guess if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself first.
I'm Nick Brokhausen. I was at CCN on RT Habu and RT Crusader.
Thank you. And Don?
I'm Don Hassey. I was at CCS with the 195th Assault Helicopter Company. And during the Vietnam War, we covered Sigma, Omega, Project Delta, and CCS during our time there. Thank you, Don. And Dick?
Dick Thompson. I was at CCN 10 of RT Michigan and RT Virginia.
Okay, thank you, Dick. And Jim?
I'm Jim Shorten. My name in Vietnam was Jim Jones, and I was the 10 of RT Delaware and Bright Light mission with RT Illinois out of CCC, and I served on A502 over there, and I served in the 12th group, Russell Mann. So.
Excellent. And now you've introduced him, can we ask Russell to introduce yourself?
My name is Russ Mann. I was the medic on an A team out of Okinawa that was sent to work with SOG. We ended up at FOB 3 in Khe Sanh, and because we sort of got trapped there by the siege, we didn't run a lot of exotic missions. We just fought a 77-day battle, no big deal. So there you go.
Was Tim Kirk with you?
No.
Thank you, Russ. And Tilt, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. John, aka Tilt Meyer, RT Idaho, FOB1 CCN.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, gentlemen. So I guess I'll just dive in with questions. I think we're going to have questions posted also from the audience, and we'll just, just make it conversational, I guess. I don't want to make it like an interrogation. It's more fun if you guys just talk to each other, and I gently slide into the background and have a rest. So don't mind, don't be waiting for me to ask questions. Just dive in. So what I'd like to know, first of all, or what our audience would like to know, because we know about some of the other guys because we've spoken to them before. Dick, can we ask how you got your call sign, Dynamite?
We had to choose. Call signs or code names at CCN when we got there, and my choice was Ranger, but that was taken before I got a chance to ask for it. And Dynamite seemed to match up pretty well with me, relatively small. I like to blow things up. I was into demolition. I always carried a lot of C4 and things with me, and was fortunate enough to get to blow up a lot of things before I left. So had a good time.
Thank you. And can we ask Nick? I don't actually know your call sign. So what is it, and how did you get it?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't remember a call sign. I remember one call sign. It was Wolf Spill. You know, our call signs changed every time we went in on a mission, and that wasn't always the same one. If it was, I never was aware of it. Mostly they called me him.
Or knucklehead.
Is that because you were not allowed on the radio?
I just never remember having a code name. I see it all the time in Tilt's books and some of the others in that. But for the life of me, I can't remember them ever assigning a specific code name, call sign, you know. I just remember, you know, there was straw hats, and the Americans were straw hats, and the little people were something else.
Soap bubbles?
What was that?
Was it soap bubbles? I think. Tilt, you know, is it soap bubble?
Maybe. I'm with Nick. I remember the straw hats. But part two, I'm sorry.
I think the Americans were called straw hats. If you called them wounded in that. I got 4 straw hats that are down, whatever the little people were called.
Right.
I've
Okay.
consumed a lot of alcohol since those days, so my memory isn't exactly on top of things.
Fair enough. Okay. And Russ, did you have a code name of Panzer? Is that right?
That's correct. When my A team arrived in Nha Trang from Okinawa, we came in on a C-130. We got there the night that Tet started in 1968. So the base was in a little bit of chaos. The next morning, we were checking in, so to speak, with the CNC. And they basically read them off a list and said, you're going to be, you know, your code name's this, your code name's that. My code name was Panzer. So it was an assigned code name. And the purpose of it was not really to share it, but so that if you needed to be named in a radio transmission, they could use your code name. And supposedly the folks back at the base would know who that was in reality. So there you are. So it's not because I have any special Germanic qualities. It was just assigned off a list of names.
Well, you're kind of built like a Panzer, so I thought maybe that was the reason you got it.
I do, yeah, I'm on the sturdy side.
As far as I know, the only person in Vietnam that drove a Panzer was Nick, right? But it wasn't a Panzer, it was a half track.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Sam.
That didn't last long.
Hi,
Then his
Jim.
maintenance found out it had whip antennas on the back of it. He confiscated it. He didn't want the radios. He just wanted the whip antennas, so he looked like Hemingway's canoe when he
Oh, yeah.
stopped. Things whipping back and forth.
Didn't somebody drive it over an officer's Jeep?
There was rumors of that. And it was the colonel's staff car, not his Jeep. We had it chained between our building and I think who was next door to us? Was it was Dirty Dick Daugherty's team, and that we'd run a log chain around the building and chained it to the building, and that so the rest of recon wouldn't steal it from us while we were sleeping.
Well, you're lucky you didn't know Don Hassey back in the day, because he's very light-fingered when it comes to vehicles.
I might have tried to figure it out. Yes, that's true.
Well, we were authorized in recon company, I think like 3 Jeeps and, well, at CCN, they were supposed to have like 8 Jeeps, 6 deuce and a half, 2 3/4 tons. There were 34 Jeeps in recon company alone.
Yeah, I supplied some of them.
Yeah, I know. You know, Pee Wee Reese stole the provost marshal's Jeep because he was queer for the siren.
So your half track didn't last too long then. You spent a lot of time planning how to get that half track, and then it didn't last very long.
Yeah, well, it took us about 2 weeks to set up the scam for the major, to lift it off his hands and that. And then when we finally lifted it, I think we had it for, I don't know, a couple of weeks before Manus decided that recon company did not need a half track, that it needed to be better employed hauling his little butt down to the pink house.
Well, if anyone in the audience is wondering what on earth we're talking about, you need to read We Few by Nick. His book We Few has got a hilarious chapter about how they went about securing the half track from the major. And I'm not going to spoil the story, I guess, by telling the whole thing now, but it is great. So, and I just want to thank you personally for for the book you wrote, because it's so good. Really entertaining.
I stole the half track because I was trying to get one up on McLaughlin. McLaughlin had come back from extension leave, and we wanted to greet him at the airport. The team and all the rest of the ones that were still sober, and he showed up at the airport with Colonel Belfi on the same flight coming back from Saigon, and they rolled out the red carpet because they said there was a general on board. And when the first person off the plane was McLaughlin, and he was wearing a Civil War Confederate officer's uniform that he picked up somewhere in the States, and it had complete with the little, black feather on the side of the hat and that. Yeah, those were healthy days.
This is for everybody, actually, just to go around. How much of what you learned in Vietnam shaped the future of Special Forces?
Wow.
But the only thing I can think of would be something like the INA drills. That's about the immediate action drills. I know I did a little write-up with that. I think Dale Hansen did some write-up on it, but we did a couple of those things, and I think they sent it to the War College or something so they can learn a little bit about those kind of tactics. Other than that, I don't know what else you could learn, because everything has changed so much. I mean, heck, we went in with just our shirt and our web gear, and that was about it. Nowadays, they're going in with suits of armor on, so it's a little different. Anybody else?
Yeah, at the last night they had the dinner for the 60th anniversary of the 5th Special Forces Group at Fort Campbell, and during one of the speeches, well, a couple of speeches, the General Mulholland, retired Lieutenant General John Mulholland, and Maury Vigil, who was a retired Command Sergeant Major out of 5th Group. They both made comments about how SOG had laid down the foundation for Special Forces in a lot of different areas that have moved forward. And the other day, we had a conversation with some of the people at SOCOM, who also had the same comment. They had to change some of the tactics, perhaps, but a lot of the foundational things about patrols, helicopter extractions, and things like that. They said the SOG helped build a foundation for that, upon which they built and improved things that we did. So I'm just quoting others, because I was only in for 3.5 years, unlike some folks.
Well, I know that Norm Doney's rules for recon are still used. The techniques that he wrote when he was with Project Delta, and one of the SFA Chapter 47 members in Portland commented at his funeral that when he went to Special Forces training, they pulled out his rules, and he was, Norm was the reason that he joined Special Forces, so he'd already seen him before, so I know that. And one thing from the aviation side, I think the McGuire rig, which led to the Stabo rig for extracting people out of small places, is still used in some capacity. And of course, then
Here we
they've
go.
added fast roping to it.
I can think of a couple of things that carried over. I'd say primary amongst them was the tactics involving surgical use of air power, combined arms between Covey, ourselves, and the aircraft. You know, being able to lay in precision airstrikes. I mean precision, because we were calling in airstrikes, danger close all the time, and using air power to suppress the enemy if we wanted to move in a certain direction. All that was developed, you know, from our tactics and from our operations, and that carried over to the point where now every A team has got an Air Force fella on it that trains with them, lives with them, swaps spit with them, and calls in all their airstrikes. And I think the second thing was, you know, the tactics. I can remember in Fort Devens in the 10th group, as late as, you know, the 76, they were still passing around copies of lessons learned from the 1-0 schools, which was basically tips of the trade from all the 1-0s that ever went through there. And it was a pretty, you know, probably about 20 pages of how to rig your equipment, how to move silently, how to eat rations like everybody else is, so you can't be smelled because you smell different. You know, all those little tips of the trade followed through and filtered down to the A teams that later went into Desert Storm and other areas. So there was a lot of cross-pollination from SOG to the next generation of SF, I think. Or I could be mistaken. Hopefully none of them picked up any sort of felonious ideas.
Well, also I could add that Lynn Black and I were asked by our Sergeant Major John Hobbs in '69 to put together lessons learned from CCN, and we wrote it. Lynn, he is a talented artist. He drew many pictures to go with it, like Nick was saying, with the extractions, the McGuire rig, etc. And we put it together. It took a few months, and we turned it in. And we never saw it again. We heard that it was printed, and then they used the military jargon where a lot of places, Lynn and I use common language. So the printing became militarized. So we never saw a follow-up on it.
Thanks, Till. Dick, could I ask you a question about a follow-on from this, which is to do with, I know you went on to study psychological preparedness for SOCOM in your work after SOG, and did that derive from the work, the experiences in Vietnam?
I drew a lot, you know, from my experiences and experiences of others, and you know, some of the real giants that I had an opportunity to work with. But yeah, trying to understand the impact of stress, what it does to you, how you mitigate that, how you continue to go for, you know, days without sleep, how you continue to function when you're doing that. All of the sleep work was incorporated into what was called Airland Battle 2000, how we were going to fight the war in the 21st century. So a lot of the SS teams are using that. I spent time with the UK, their Army staff, in terms of teaching techniques around sleep deprivation, how SF teams could continue to operate. So yeah, it got incorporated into a lot.
Thank you. And that's obviously fed into what we're raising funds for tonight, in a sense, in the arsenal system you've developed.
Right. Yeah, it was, you know, we spent a lot of time looking at what are the best practices to help you maintain stress resilience, build stress resilience, and be able to continue to, you know, press the battle for long periods of time. So what you're seeing on the arsenal, or what appeared to me after years of research to be the key ones to help you live longer in a normal life, but also help you to have much higher stress resilience and be able to handle a COVID environment like we're in now, or be able to deal with pulling out of Vietnam, pulling out of Afghanistan. There are a lot of techniques in here that can help veterans, can help anyone. So it's not just veterans that get stressed out, everyone does.
Well, from a medical point of view, I know that in those years, in the late 60s and early 70s, we were beginning to dabble with medications to enhance alertness, stay awake, and most A teams had a secret stash of dexedrine of some form that they would hand out.
Hornet head.
Yeah, Hornet. That's right. The Green Hornets, and the so the Green Hornets were. I'm trying to remember the brand name. I think it was Dexamil. It was it was marketed as a diet drug, but we used it occasionally when things got tough to stay awake all night if we had to be alert. I
use it
think
on
that,
stand down so you could stay, keep on drinking.
so that reminds me, my team sergeant once, Roy Johnson was his name. He once got incredibly drunk, and he needed to function the next morning. And he came into my hooch, and he said, "Sergeant Mann, I've got a horrible hangover. You're the fucking medic. Cure it." So I had a perfected hangover cure. I gave a dexedrine, and then I give a little Thorazine to take the edge off the dexedrine, and an APC for the headache, and a salt tablet to help you redistribute fluids. And in a couple hours, you'd be able to stand up straight.
Oxygen, straight oxygen, and Darbon works like a charm.
The crafted SOP for this.
We had a funny story at FOB1 on a team that had used the Green Hornets. They were out on an ambush at night outside of FOB1, and they started calling in mortar support, and we heard no AK fire or anything. So finally the base commander asked the 1-0, "Who's attacking you?" He said, "We're under attack by green elephants." Chipping out from the Green Hornets, or pink elephants, some kind of elephants. But it was, he had a couple too many of those Green Hornets.
Well, when I came to Devon's, I in my baggage was a bottle of Green Hornets and we had a PT test. So I gave everybody in the company a Green Hornet for the PT test. And I mean, even Gary Stan on that, the alcohol, drug, and that, he's out there. Let's run another mile. Come on, we can do the run, goddamn jump. Then chief medic goes out, told Major, I think it was Major Keeney, he goes, "Sir, I think these guys are on drugs." It took about 5 minutes for somebody to snitch me up. Well, Nick gave us a pep pill. Tossed my locker away. Confiscated.
I know that they used to give us those Green Hornets to stay awake on ambushes and stuff when I was on the A team. But, those things, they make you talk. You want to talk, and you just got to be quiet, but they'll make you want to talk.
Yeah. And they make it jerky after a while. If you take them too long, you start feeding on your own internal organs.
I'll tell you, the one that they used to get me was like, I remember I had all 4 of my molars removed at one time. So they gave me some Darvon, and our medic said, well, open up the capsule and take out that little pink round ball in there and take that round ball and leave the rest there. He goes, because that rest is a buffer to try to ease it down a bit. So I took those things, and I swear, man, I could hear the ants attacking me. Anyway.
You're supposed to take the whole capsule?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're supposed to take right. Yeah.
Huh. Should I just ate the little balls?
No, that's just a little protective thing. You just take that out and take the little ball.
Yeah, that's what I did. I took the little balls. I threw the rest of the stuff away.
Yeah, right. It's a buffer.
Can I ask you guys? This is a question that's come in from Digby in the audience. What was the funniest thing you did in Vietnam that you weren't supposed to be doing that you still haven't been caught for?
Ooh.
Anyone?
You guys want
We need to know.
No, Nick has to go first on this one.
We all know about Tilt's radio, and you weren't caught for the radio though, were you? The KY 38.
No, just thrown out of camp. That's all.
Did they know? Did they know it was you? Oh, because you said you'd lost it.
Oh no, we fessed right up to it because I said if it doesn't work, I'll destroy it in the field, and he agreed before we went in. So after we get into the target, it didn't work. I destroyed it, and then I came back and said, "No, I never said that." And it's time to go home. My DEROS, I had extended my ETS to go to Vietnam, so my ETS was up in 2 weeks. So I said, "Okay, you're an asshole. I'm leaving now." We had a big party at RT Idaho, and put everybody to bed that night, and then left the next morning.
I think that's quite a moving part of your book where you talk about the sitting outside with, was it Sal or Heap?
Hep was the last one standing. And then he said, "Can I help you with anything else?" And I said, "No." And he literally laid down right in the sand and passed out because all the other guys had passed out either in the bed or outside. We put them all back in bed. So I picked him up, dusted him off. He's light, put him in his bed, then went down and packed and left first light.
Wow. Yeah, that had to have been quite a moment.
That was, it hurt.
I made a tracking device one time. And it was, it was a cigar box. I went to the PX and we bought a Tamiya, one of those radio controlled tanks and models of a German tank or whatever. Took the motors out of it and the actuators in that, what they call them, solenoids or whatever. And we rigged up this box, and in the middle of it, it had one of those motors with the shaft pointing up, and on the top of it was a brightly colored pinafore propeller. And then it was a reduction gear. And the way it worked was when it got power, it would start winding and the propeller would start swirling around on the top and that. And we needed something flashy because the Indian brew are real curious. They're cautious about everything they're around, the trackers and that. But anything bright and shiny, they're going to check out. So we used to drop stuff all the time, blood bags, radio, peanut radios, shit like that all the time out there for them to find. So we came up with this device because we'd gone into the 2 targets in a row and we had trackers on us both times. So Mac and I decided to make this thing. And Jim Butler, who, God bless his soul, I'm going to bury him here up in Arlington next week. He's eventually became my brother-in-law. He got shot in the head. Now, any decent human being except the captain would die. But no, he doesn't die. He goes to the hospital. It's a grazing wound. We don't know that. All we know is that he got shot in the head. Well, he's got to be dead, so we tossed his room. And his mother had sent him a Christmas tree, little Christmas tree with all these blinking lights on it. And I went, oh, that's it. That's what we need, those lights. So we stole the lights and we installed them on the outside of that box. We actually got 2 trackers with it when we set it on the ground. It worked perfect. When the thing wound down, it would pull you cut the spoons on the grenades so they can go off inside the box. And we had a mini CS on one side and a white phosphorus on the other side. And the actuator was actually a cardboard tube with metal on either end with a steel ball bearing. So when they picked it up and they tipped it, it went down, made contact, the thing started whirring, they dropped it, the CS went off. They went to pick it up and the WP went off. But that for years, I didn't know this. He kept telling his wife, he says, you know what some rotten son of a bitch did? When I was shot in the head, they stole my Christmas tree. I had no idea. He told his wife. I thought he knew. And I was at Thanksgiving dinner one time, and I happened to say, well, you remember when we stole your Christmas tree lights? And the room went silent. Oh, I might have made a faux pas here.
Oh, that's funny.
You have to adapt and innovate. Adapt and innovate.
A shortage of creative tactics and techniques and procedures that we hear about. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, like for example, I mean, today when I was talking to the guys at SOCOM, they still train using 5-second fuses for their claymores in the event that they're trying to break contact with the enemy. So that's one more little tactic that we developed. Not as good as yours though, Nick. That takes the cake. I gotta give you that one.
Charles Wesley was the skunk works if you wanted something because he liked demolitions. You know, he's and flying around up there in that sport coupe as a covey, and that you never knew what was going to come out the window.
Yeah,
but he made this device because you used to get the claymores, you can hang coat hangers on them, throw them up in the trees and run to the end, hit the clacker and hope it's pointing in the right direction when you go off. He came up with this device. He took the plastic cups that the M79 CS rounds came in. They had a real long tube that held the CS round in that, and he welded them together with heat so they were like a V8. And then he cut the spoons off of the mini grenades and shoved them down in there and pulled the pins on. So they're in there, the package, nothing's going to happen. He put coat hangers on it, and the same thing, put a long lead on it. You could throw it up in the trees and crank it, and this thing would theoretically throw 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 in each, 12 mini grenades out at different heights when they went off. Well, he tested it down at the range at CCN. Unfortunately, the same day they had a thunderstorm. And he had all of his toys in the back of the Jeep. He took Cook and Mac along with him because I was hiding. I wouldn't go with him. And I was laying on my bunk and I heard this boom, 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 and a bunch of grenades going off. I thought the camp was getting hit. And then the truck comes back and Wesley's sitting in the back and everybody is just staring at it. Wouldn't even talk to him. It would lightning, St. Elmo's fire. They were sitting down there and everything started glowing blue and that. So they decided to move over to the target shack that was on the range. And that's when the Jeep went off with everything in it.
Oh my God.
The axle, part of the axle actually landed in the officer's latrine up by the officer hutch up there.
Wow.
Yeah. Skunk works.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, I don't know if anybody else has any other stories they want to touch on first, but I can jump on to another question. I'm Sam, by the way, for Russ and Nick. I didn't get to introduce myself due to technical issues, so it's excellent to get the chance to talk to you gentlemen. So thank you for being here. And of course, everybody else, all you gentlemen who I do know, we're very excited to talk to y'all. And I wanted to ask a question from Hoot here that he asked on our website, and he's wondering, so of course SOG is famous for working with indigenous personnel as Special Forces does, and they were such important members of your teams. Can you give us some examples of techniques and tactics and procedures that the Indig taught you to use in the field? I know a lot of it came both ways, but what did they what were some things that they were known for to do?
On my Hatchet force, I had an interesting Cambodian gentleman that would walk point for us, and he liked to walk point with an M60 machine gun with a short piece of belt, 30, 40 rounds hanging out of it, and he would have it, over his shoulder on a strap and walk with it pointing forward. So if he heard a noise to his left, let's say if you're an American and you're walking point, you hear a noise to your left, you'll turn to your left, point your gun, and maybe fire off a round or two if you think there might be something there. He didn't waste any time. He started pulling the trigger and then swung the gun to the left. He cleared everything from front, center to left in one swipe.
Whoa.
So I thought it was an interesting technique.
Kuman told me, where I was trying to make animal sounds, because they were always teaching, yards forage the entire time they're out there. They're picking up grubs and eating them, getting stuff off of under leaves and that, chewing on it. They're always, they're hunter gatherers. Bong was worst about it. He'd pull out these looked like maggots. They were grubs. They tasted horrible. They tasted like bad fish, what they tasted, but they were really rich in protein. And the yards were always coming up, here, try this, chew on this, use this to brush your teeth. And I was trying to do animal sounds. Well, I can make sounds like you guys, because they can imitate wildlife perfectly. The birds, the fuck you lizards, they had them all down pat. So I gave my rendition of what I thought was a bird, and Kuman looked at me and he said, "Don't use that." I said, "Why?" He says, "It sounds like a howler monkey with a bad stomach." Sometimes you just didn't pick up the skill, no matter how hard you tried. And they do weird things with the equipment too. Like when booby trapping something, had a way of running the wires and that. No matter where if you hit that wire or tried to remove the trap, you were going to blow it up. They looked like a spider web when they got done. But they were very adept at it.
Did they have any tracking techniques that, for recon that they'd use?
All the time. They teach you how to cover up, how to look for, bruises on the underbrush, because that's what the trackers look for. They look for, bruises on plant bruises. If they see the plant bruise, they know something went through there. Depending on the size and the location of that, they're going to know whether it was a human, a deer, a tiger, or howler monkey, whatever. But they were always teaching things about tracking. Look at this track, Chung-Si. It's the guy's got a bad foot. Things like that. Little tips all the time. You were constantly in school with them.
And did any of that make its way into the recon handbook or the 1-0 school or anything like that that had come kind of originated with those indigenous troops?
I taught my teams when I was at Devon's and Bragg and that, when I was on a team and that, we were out in the bush and that, I always taught guys that were out there with me, hey, look at this, this is something you can do, that a new way to start a fire, or, some way to cook something. That's a lizard that looks tasty, whatever. So I always passed on, tips of the trade to the guys that was on the team. And I'm sure everybody else did too.
That's really cool.
Can we jump in on NVA tactics? I mean, this is fresh in our minds because we've just been fighting the NVA in our video game for the last 3 hours. And we designed the tactics based on Tilt and General Bore giving us, and Jim giving us a lot of input on it, and people seem to really like that about our game. Can we ask what each of you a bit about what NVA tactics you experienced firsthand? Maybe start with Jim, as you're up on the screen.
Yeah. One of the things I learned, but it was on the A team with the NVA tactics, is that, like, I've been to 3 camps that got overrun. My own camp, when it was overrun on an outpost, what the enemy does is they send the sappers in first. They're usually naked and they got charcoal on them, and they carry satchel charges, and then they work their way through the fence, and then they run around the camp throwing the satchel charges in the bunkers and what have you. But if you can take out that first wave of sappers coming through, there's a good chance they're gonna lose all their tactical know-how.
Momentum.
Yeah, because what happens is the second wave can't do its job until the first wave does its job, and the third wave can't do anything until the second wave does their job. So like the second wave might go in and throw blankets or ladders, little log ladders or something over the concertina wire to get over it. They won't be able to do that if you take out that wave. The third wave can't run across the ladders, so they get all kind of confused. So that was one of the things I knew, is they were very structured. And if you destroyed that structuring of their tactics, then it kind of screws them up a little bit. But when it came to NVA in Laos and Cambodia, I didn't come across any large enough groups. Well, I guess I did, but it's a little different. I had them where they came in truckloads and came after me. But their tactics over there in SOG, I couldn't really answer too much to it. Other than the fact that I know if you had signals, guys shooting signals, that we didn't walk away from it. We walked towards it, because you might walk towards it and then you get shots over here, and then you walk away from that, and the next thing, or you walk away from it, then the other guy does the same thing and you walk away from it. The next thing, you're walking into an ambush. So that's about the only thing I could really comment on SOG with the NVA tactics.
Thank you, Jim. Maybe Dick, could you go next?
Yeah, one of the things that I started to notice when we would make contact was, and particularly after we got into 69, it appeared that the NVA had been taught, particularly the ones that had been trained to go out and go after SOG teams, they had been taught that when they made contact with you, you were going to break contact and run. And that's what they expected you to do, is to try to run, to try to go to an LZ, to try to get away from them. So I had my guys on some occasions, if I gave them the right command, if it was a relatively small group of NVA, was instead of running assault, we would go after them. And it was like they got confused. What are they doing? They're coming after us. That's not supposed to happen. And particularly, when we got the 30-round magazines. So we didn't have many of them, but everybody on the team had at least one. So if you had that in your weapon, in some cases, we'd put a bunch of tracers in there too. And, if you have 7 or 8 guys open up on them with 30-round magazines and going after them and slinging hand grenades at them, they would run. It just stunned them. They didn't know what to do. And then you could stop, leave your claymores behind as you started to work down, go find your LZ. You didn't want to stay there and continue to engage them because there's just too many of them coming. But that initial contact, really stunned them sometimes if you went after them rather than running.
That's the classic Ranger approach to an ambush.
Superiority.
That's a classic McLaughlin. Follow me. I'm going after him.
Or Marines, charge.
Yeah. Or like Murphy, fix banana knives. Yeah.
Can I ask Russ about Khe Sanh? Because you were there through the siege.
Yes, sir.
What NVA tactics did you experience during the siege?
Well, that's a really good question. One of the few times that I had face-to-face contact with the NVA, when I say we, my team and our attached Hatchet force, so 50 people or so, snuck outside the wire. We had been under artillery pounding for a month or so, and we'd had it. We'd said, this is bullshit. We don't care what it costs. We're going to go kick some ass. So we snuck out of the wire and traveled not very far, quarter mile or so from the wire to the NVA trench line. This is before first light. And my team sergeant, who was a Korean War vet, got everybody online. At first light, we assaulted their trench line, ran like hell, jumped in the trench, threw hand grenades, shot in all directions, and then got the hell out of there and ran back to our wire. We only had one injury, and it was one of my Montagnards got hit had a big splinter in his face from the wooden handle of a Chi-Com grenade. And the rest of us escaped scot-free because we caught them sleeping. And we didn't stick around to duke it out. We went in, threw all the firepower we had, and then ran like hell.
That sounds yeah, amazing. So you did get those times where you were face to face with the MVA around Khe Sanh then?
Oh yes, yeah. So yeah, and they were in entrenched positions. This was sort of World War II or World War I warfare. We were inside of our defensive line. They had an encircling line. And in between was no man's land, and that's where we played. So that's kind of how that went.
And I guess because you were special forces, you got volunteered to go out beyond the perimeter.
Well, that's that's another interesting question. The Marines had a disastrous platoon-sized patrol that went outside the wire and were wiped out almost to a man. It's called the Ghost Patrol. And a few survivors managed to make it back in. Well, when that happened, the Marine commandant at Khe Sanh told the Marines, no more patrolling outside the wire. We already know we're surrounded by a superior force. We don't need to go poke them. The SOG guys were we had our own little separate piece of the defensive line. In fact, we had Marines behind us. And the Marines had told us, if we get hit and you have to leave, don't come through us, because we had Indig with us. And the Marines said, we can't tell the good one from the bad ones. We're just going to kill everybody. So we were in a sort of a no retreat spot. We did active patrolling for a couple of reasons. One was that because we were a highly classified unit, they had us doing some classified stuff. So we would go outside the perimeter to put in vibration sensors so that the enemy approach could be monitored. They were pretty clever. They were plastic, and they were, I don't know, a foot or so high with a spike on the bottom, and they looked like a plant. And so we would just stick them in the ground, and they had a battery, and if anybody walked by, the vibration would be picked up, and it would send a signal back to a receiver. And each one of these things had a separate electronic identifier, so they'd know which one it was. So our job was to sneak out and plant these things at precise points so that the approach of the enemy could be monitored electronically. So we got that job because it was super secret, and we had secret clearances, so we got to do it. So we did active patrolling outside of the Khe Sanh base, and it was Um, it was never a question of if we were going to make contact. We always did, and we always had an escape plan because there was no question. If we hung out long enough, we'd bump into somebody. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you, Russ. A unique bit of history, that is, and I'm looking forward to talking to you a lot more about it. So thank you. Sam's got the next. Oh, go on, Till.
Yeah, we had don't forget the Pat Watkins story from Khe Sanh with RT Lyon. He and his brew went out, and they went out fishing with hand grenades, came back. The next day, the Marines went out and they had this big firefight, and they captured the NVA officer that triggered the ambush on the Marines. And he told Pat Watkins, through an interpreter, "We saw your recon team. You're in our kill zone, but we didn't want to kill two Americans within DIS. We don't care. We want to kill more Americans with the Marine Corps."
Wow.
And then the other thing is we had our teams that were hit by NVA sappers who wore only the loincloths, like with the attack August 23rd, 1968 at FOB4. We had a couple of teams that were wiped out, and the indids told them specifically that the sappers who, as Dick said, by 69, they had over a battalion, we're told, of sappers that were trained throughout Laos to react to a SOG recon team going in. And they also would kill the Americans and leave the indids alive for PSYOPs.
Yeah. Thank you, Till. We've gone a little over time because we started late. So just to let the audience know, we're going to run for another 12 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap up before tomorrow's session. We'll continue this discussion. I think we missed Nick out. Can we ask you about NVA tactics you experienced firsthand?
Well, when I first got there, their tactic, by the time I left there, their tactics had changed almost 180 degrees in some cases. Because by the time 72, end of 71 rolled around, you couldn't sneak and peek anywhere west of Hawaii. They had the area so saturated with troop concentrations and so interlaced, and they had anti-recon teams, which they didn't have that much of when I first got there. They adapted to us, like in any combat situation, you're always on the learning curve. If you're not on the learning curve, you're soon to be in the morgue, because somebody's going to come up with something that'll trick you, that'll get you to move a certain way. The one thing that with the NBA, if they left an opening, it's because they had a trap there. If they were pushing you and they seemed to be pushing you in a direction, they were trying to get you in there where they could slap your dick real hard and kill you. So, you always were cautious of that, always cautious of the type of terrain you're trying to fight through. You don't want to get in a ravine, a stream bed where you're canalized in that. And they were using stuff too. They were picking up some of our old BDUs, or no, not BDUs, CBUs, and rewiring them and hanging them up in the trees with tripwires. And you go through an area and these things would drop on you. And they were CBU units that just didn't go off from the airport because they were constantly scavenging our stuff and making it into stuff that they could use. They're very, very innovative people. Wow. And we hope to be the same. So we survived. So I guess we accomplished the mission.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask a question about, so air support was obviously a really, really instrumental part of SOG operations. And wanted to ask about some of the maybe unusual or moments that stood out to do with air support. I kind of want to start with Don on this because he worked with, in his unit, the Sky Chiefs. They had the Thunder Chicken gunships. Did you have any moments that stood out to you with their operations, Don?
Well, I don't know if you would classify any of them as unusual, because it was always just, pretty much standard fare. We'd put the recon team in and they'd go out and stir things up and get 500 or 1,000 people chasing them, and then we'd go get them. And,
Oh, Rose.
you know, it was kind of, you know, that was just kind of the normal course of business. But so I don't think that, you know, from that standpoint, but we did have some, you know, some situations that we did, like we spent a month with Project Delta, and they had a Roadrunner platoon. And the Roadrunner platoon, the team consisted of 3 guys, and they were dressed in NBA uniforms, had NBA weapons, NBA paperwork, and were trained on the NBA units that were in the area. And they called them Roadrunners because their job was to go in and run down the road and capture somebody or gather information. And we would, after inserting them, then you'd have to go land in some little jungle clearing and pick up these 3 NBA soldiers. And, you know, that was a little disconcerting. You definitely wanted to know the guys that you put out there, and, you know, we became pretty close to them, and you could look in their eyes and tell who they were, because you swoop into an LZ and this guy in an AK-47 and a pith hat and NBA uniform comes running towards your helicopter, and you know, he better not make a wrong move. And you know, that was a little bit hairy, but they were very effective in what they did on the ground when they were inserted in operations.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that had to have been a PID nightmare for air support. I think, Nick, didn't you talk about in your book, didn't the colonel and a couple others go out dressed like NBA and have a run-in with some unassociated air support?
Team.
Yeah.
Donnie Belfi, Colonel, Larry Manus, what the hell was the big diver's name? And all of them oversized. You know, they're not like little skinny guys like Mac and me, 135 pounds sopping wet. You know, these are behemoths dressed up in NBA khakis with pith helmets and that. You know, if I'd have been the NBA, I'd have killed them just because I suspected they were eating my rations. Yeah, they went out, they got jumped by a pink team out in the AO. Belfi wanted to get on the ground. And let me tell you, Saigon had a bloody come apart when they found out that he'd gone on the ground. He was a lieutenant colonel with all kinds of stuff locked up in his head out there running recon. You get me, you get Mac, you get Tilt. You might as well do a Vulcan mind meld with a dog. You're not getting any intel out of it. You get by the colonel, he's probably got some juicy tidbits. So anyway, they go out, they're going to do a prisoner snatch. And the pink team saw them. They were in a free fire zone. And, you know, saw the pith helmets, figured they were NVA and fired their ass up with a nail rocket. And they got down behind some anthills, and Manus got hit in the ass, and God, I can't remember the guy's name. He drowned down in Central America years later. He got hit, and one other guy got hit, and they called. What saved them was they called for air support, and the package, they'd only been on the ground for about 10, 15 minutes. So the air package turns around and comes back, and the guns go down. They identify where they're at, and they can see it's, you know, it's a Loach and 2 Cobras working them over. So the Cobras from the air package actually pulled in front of the Cobras that getting ready to fire them up, and basically told them on the radio and said, "That's a recon team. If you open fire, we're going to blow you out of the air." And they fizzled off to wherever they go when they're not shooting up the countryside. By the way, if you can smell urine and burnt kerosene, that means there are aviators around. Yeah,
That's true.
the stuff they did with the helicopters and that's why when we started SOAR, you know, it originally was only open to recon. If you were in recon, it was, you know, it was our answer to not being recognized by the Special Forces Association. We started our own. And then we decided to let the air crews in because, you know, they were our comrades in arms. They flew us in, and then they were dumb enough and crazy enough to come back and pick us up after they, you know, saw what was there anyway. And then later it morphed into, well, if you were in the aviation unit, you could be a member of SOG. So we ended up with their basketball control officer and their cook and whoever else was. But the air crews, greatest respect for them. Those guys had big time balls, you know, and it amazed me. You'd look up, shit flying everywhere, and you tunk, 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 coming out of the aircraft and that. And there's a 19-year-old sitting in the pilot seat, just as calm as if he was going to the store. You know, good guys.
Yeah. I mean, I was a crew chief door gunner, and you know, those guys had set up there in their little armored seat. They had a little armament in their seat, but you know, their arms and legs and head and everything stuck out from the armor, and they couldn't see a thing going on behind them. And in fact, one of our pilots told a story about his very first mission to pick up a recon team. He was the co-pilot, and so the aircraft commander told him his job was to just watch the instruments and call out the airspeed and elevation to him, and don't look at anything but the instrument panel. And he said, we got down about ready to pick the team up, and he said, I snuck a look up through the seating canopy, and to my horror, I couldn't see any blue sky. All I could see was green foliage from the jungle. And he said, I didn't realize until later that it was the crew chief and the door gunner that was guiding those pilots down into that triple canopy jungle. And they would, you know, vector them down in there. And that pilot just sit there, just cool, taking his instructions and moving back 6 inches and over a foot, and down 3 feet, and rotating the tail rotor to the right 30 degrees, down again, and you know, just amazing. And so yeah, we're really proud of our pilots, because they just had ice water in their veins. I mean, we could shoot, at least, you know, we had the M60. We could feel like we were doing something. They just had to fly.
Or it could be no brains, no headaches.
Possibly.
We're about close to time. I was just going to ask Tilt, because didn't you have a story with a Sky Raider and a guy chomping a cigar or saluting you or something?
Well, we could make it with 2 quick Sky Raider stories. My personal experience was our last mission. We had a 4-man team. We're in the Ashaw Valley. Sky Raiders did gun runs, and on one gun run, the SPAD was so close to the jungle that when he came down after the gun run, he turned the aircraft on the side so I could see him. He could see me. I could tell you he was smoking a Philly cheroot. And I saluted him, and he saluted back as he buzzed over. And, you know, Don Engsbretson, who was a SPAD pilot, told the story of how he was on a mission out of CCC. And the team said, bring it in close. And they had this back and forth. And his wingman said, don't do it. But Don listened to it. The team dropped the ordnance. I forget if it was napalm or bombs. But there was that he said the seconds expanded into hours. He heard nothing, and he was terrified that he had hurt the team. But then finally the 1-0 came back and said, do it again. He says, we got some casualties, but do it again. We'd rather get hurt by SPADs than by the NBA. So that's our closing SPAD story for the night.
Damn.
It's really danger close. Thank you, Till.
No kidding.
Thank
you
you.
want a third one? Here's a third one.
Oh, go on then.
John Walton,
Absolutely.
on August 3rd, John was on a target. They had a napalm run. and the canister landed and it broke open, and a piece of the metal slid on the ground towards John Walton, who was sitting there with his legs spread, and the canister came to rest between his legs with the napalm still burning.
My God.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Just another day in SOG.
Jesus.
That's a stunning
Oh, man.
story and a great place to postpone. We will be back midday Saturday. That's tomorrow, and we've all warmed up now, so we can just dive straight in tomorrow. Hopefully, everyone's got their technology sorted. What our team in the game is about to do is we're going to go and run Bright Light and rescue a pilot. So it's quite a good outro from what we've just been talking about. But sincerely, guys, from everyone in the audience who's tuned in and watching, and from everyone in my team, I'd just like to thank you for attending tonight and for giving your time up and sharing your experiences with us. I have to say, you have thousands and thousands of fans out there that all really respect and admire the work you guys did in Vietnam, and a full welcome home from them to you. And we'll catch you tomorrow.
Airborne.
Ready for it.
You are.
Thank you.
Have a good one, Russ.